The Keth-Morin Syndicate dealt in exotic flesh the way other civilizations traded in rare metals, with clinical precision and absolutely no sense of irony about the moral implications. Their latest offering sat in a reinforced transport cage that hummed with enough containment fields to restrain a small moon, while Commandant Vexhai of the Hegemony's premier military academy tried very hard not to look like he was having second thoughts about this purchase. "Magnificent specimen," the Syndicate representative was saying, her crystalline voice carrying the sort of enthusiasm typically reserved for discussing profitable investments. "Apex predator from the void reaches, psychically gifted, bonds only with species that demonstrate true predatory superiority. The thing in the cage looked like someone had taken a panther, fed it nothing but steroids and existential dread for several centuries, then given it opposable thumbs and a personal grudge against the concept of mercy. Its 6 eyes tracked movement with the focused intensity of a creature that had never encountered anything it couldn't kill, and its bioluminescent markings pulsed in patterns that hurt to look at directly. You mentioned it has been selective in its bonding choices," Vexhai said, trying to sound like this was a feature rather than an expensive problem. The representative's laugh sounded like wind chimes made of broken promises. "Selective is one word for it. The Zephyrian War College returned it after it drove 3 of their best cadets into catatonic states. The Hegemony's 7th Fleet Academy couldn't even get it to acknowledge their existence. The Corvani Battle Institute." She paused dramatically. "Well, let's just say they're still rebuilding their psychiatric wing." Vexhai nodded as though this was exactly what he'd hoped to hear. The truth was, his academy had been sliding in the Galactic rankings for the past decade. Every other military institution boasted about their exotic training aids. The Drakmor had their phase-shifting combat drones, the Nixari trained with sentient gravity wells, and the Thuvarians had somehow weaponized mathematics itself. The Hegemony Academy had excellent facilities, competent instructors, and absolutely nothing that would make prospective cadets choose them over the competition. This creature, this war beast, was supposed to change all that. A legendary predator that would bond only with the galaxy's most elite warriors, elevating whoever earned its recognition to mythical status. The perfect marketing tool, wrapped in enough claws and teeth to be legitimately terrifying. "The bonding process," Vexhai continued, "you said it involves some form of trial?" "Multiple trials, actually. The creature conducts its own evaluation process. Psychological dominance, physical capability, predatory instinct, all assessed through methods we don't entirely understand. What we do know is that it has rejected representatives from 12 different species over the past standard decade. The beast shifted in its cage, and even through the containment fields, Vexhai felt his instinctive prey responses activate. Every rational thought in his brain was suddenly screaming contradictory instructions: run, hide, submit, fight, play dead, and several suggestions that weren't physically possible for his species. 12 species, he repeated, proud that his voice only cracked slightly. All unsuccessful. Completely unsuccessful. Though we should note that most candidates required only minimal psychological rehabilitation afterward. The word minimal was doing some truly heroic lifting in that sentence, but Vexhai had already committed to this course of action. The Academy's Board of Trustees had made it clear that either enrollment numbers improved, or he would be finding new employment in a sector of space where military experience was less valued and survival was more optional. "We accept delivery," he said. The transaction completed with the sort of bureaucratic efficiency that made galactic commerce possible and moral philosophy irrelevant. Credits transferred, ownership documents updated, insurance policies activated, and the creature that had broken the minds of some of the galaxy's finest warriors became the Academy's problem. By the time the transport cage was installed in the Academy's specialized testing facility, word had spread through the cadet population. Representatives from 12 species had failed to earn this creature's recognition. The implications were clear. Whoever succeeded would be acknowledged as belonging to a truly superior warrior race. The volunteers lined up immediately. Vexhai watched through the observation deck as the first candidate, a Theveran known for solving tactical problems by making them catch fire, approached the cage with what might charitably be called confidence. The warbeast regarded him with the sort of interest typically reserved for examining particularly intricate insects before stepping on them. The trial lasted exactly 17 seconds. The Theveran was carried out on a medical gurney, mumbling something about eyes in the darkness and the sound teeth make when they dream. The medical staff assured everyone he would recover completely, though they were notably vague about time frames. The second candidate, a Zephyrian with an impressive collection of combat ribbons, managed nearly a full minute before collapsing in what the medics diplomatically termed acute predatory awareness syndrome. The third lasted 8 seconds. The fourth requested immediate transfer to a different academy before the trial even began. By the end of the week, the list of volunteers had dwindled to species with either exceptional courage or deeply questionable judgment. The warbeast remained unimpressed, spending most of its time in what appeared to be a state of bored contempt, occasionally making sounds that the translation matrix rendered as either pathetic or digestible. Apparently, the distinction was unclear. Vexhai was beginning to calculate the resale value of a psychic predator with commitment issues when his aide mentioned the human. "The exchange student?" Vexhai asked, reviewing the enrollment files. "From the Sol system?" "That's the one. Scored adequately on all entrance examinations. Nothing exceptional, but competent enough for the exchange program. Currently enrolled in Advanced Tactical Theory and Introduction to Xenopsychology." The human had been easy to overlook. A mid-tier student from a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel. Earth had produced exactly one noteworthy contribution to galactic civilization. Their cuisine, which was apparently both delicious and psychologically disturbing in ways that food scientists were still trying to understand. "Has the human volunteered for the trials?" "No, sir." In fact, when asked, the response was, and I quote, "That thing? Yeah, I guess I could give it a try. Is this going to interfere with lunch?" Vexhai considered this. The human's casual indifference was either refreshing or deeply concerning. Every other species had approached the warbeast with the sort of reverence typically reserved for religious artifacts or unstable explosives. The human seemed to regard it as a mildly interesting scheduling conflict. "Arrange a trial session," he decided. "If nothing else, it might provide some entertainment value before we admit this entire project was a mistake." The human arrived at the testing facility 20 minutes later, carrying what appeared to be a sandwich, and looking like someone who had been interrupted during something more important. The warbeast, which had been resting in its characteristic pose of barely contained violence, lifted its 6 eyes to study this new candidate. What followed was the most anticlimactic predator-prey interaction in the facility's history. The human approached the cage with the same energy someone might bring to checking their mail, glanced at the creature with polite interest, and took a bite of their sandwich. "So," the human said, chewing thoughtfully, "what exactly is this thing supposed to do?" The warbeast's response to this question involved a sound that the translation matrix struggled to process, somewhere between a growl and a cosmic sigh of disappointment. It rose from its resting position with the fluid grace of liquid violence, 6 eyes focusing on the human with an intensity that had previously reduced seasoned warriors to whimpering philosophical abstractions. What should have been the opening move in a carefully choreographed dance of predatory dominance instead became something resembling a nature documentary, narrated by someone with deeply questionable priorities. "Oh, that's interesting," the human observed, as bioluminescent patterns began racing across the creature's hide. "Is that a threat display, or are you trying to communicate?" "Because if it's communication, you might want to work on your color transitions. Very abrupt, lacks subtlety." Vex High, watching from the observation deck, felt his secondary hearts skip several beats. The human was critiquing the war beast's intimidation techniques, like a performance art review. The creature's next move was more direct. A psychic probe designed to flood the target's mind with primal terror, the sort of existential dread that came from realizing you were standing in the presence of something that viewed your entire species as a light snack. Previous candidates had described the sensation as having their soul evaluated by death itself, or understanding what prey dreams about. The human blinked once, tilted their head, and finished their sandwich. "Huh," they said. "That was definitely something. Felt a bit like that time I had food poisoning in Bangkok, but with more cosmic implications. Are you trying to scare me, or is this some kind of mental health screening?" The beast's bioluminescence flickered, a pattern that the Academy's xenopsychologists would later identify as profound confusion mixed with growing irritation. This was not following the established protocol. Prey species were supposed to recognize superior predators, not offer constructive feedback about their psychological warfare techniques. Undeterred, the creature moved to Phase 2. Physical intimidation. It began pacing the perimeter of its containment field, muscles rippling beneath its bioluminescent hide, each movement calculated to demonstrate lethal potential. Its claws, each longer than most species' primary appendages, scored deep grooves in the reinforced flooring. "Nice muscle definition," the human commented conversationally, "though you might want to vary your movement patterns." "Very predictable gait. If you're trying to demonstrate hunting prowess, you'd probably want to show more tactical flexibility." Several Academy instructors in the observation deck began making soft, choking sounds. The human was providing performance notes to a creature that could theoretically disembowel a battalion without breaking stride. The war beast paused mid-prowl, regarding its critic with what could only be described as professional offense. The psychic emanations shifted from, "I will consume your soul," to something more like, "Are you seriously giving me feedback right now?" "Just saying," the human continued, apparently interpreting the creature's silence as interest rather than homicidal bewilderment. "Back on Earth, our apex predators tend to be more unpredictable. Take great whites. They don't announce their presence with light shows. Element of surprise, you know? Very effective." The mention of Earth's predators seemed to trigger something in the beast's evaluation protocol. The bioluminescent patterns shifted again, and Vex High's instruments detected what the technicians called active information gathering. The creature was somehow accessing data about the human's homeworld. This was typically where things became interesting. The war beast would examine the candidate's species' evolutionary history, looking for evidence of true predatory heritage. Most species had some impressive ancestors. The Thuvarians had descended from pack hunters that could phase through solid matter. The Zephyrians came from aerial predators that hunted by controlling local weather patterns, and the Corvani had evolved from something that killed its prey by singing them to death. The beast's reaction to Earth's biological history was unprecedented. Its bioluminescence began cycling through colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum, and the psychic emanations shifted from controlled evaluation to something approaching existential panic. "Yeah, we had some pretty efficient killers," the human agreed, apparently picking up on the creature's distress. Though honestly, the really impressive stuff happened after we developed agriculture. Amazing what boredom and opposable thumbs can accomplish when you put your mind to it. The war beast's pacing became more frantic. Data streams about Earth's extinction events were apparently not sitting well with a creature that prided itself on being evolution's finest predatory achievement: the Permian-Triassic extinction, the Cretaceous-Paleogene impact event, the Anthropocene. The dinosaurs were particularly unfortunate, the human continued thoughtfully. 66 million years of successful evolution ended by a rock from space. Though I suppose that's nothing compared to what we did to the passenger pigeons. At least the dinosaurs didn't see it coming. By this point, the creature had stopped pacing entirely and was simply staring at the human with an expression that transcended species barriers. The universal look of a predator realizing it might have bitten off more than it could chew, metaphorically speaking. "Are you feeling all right?" the human asked, with what sounded like genuine concern. "You look a bit overwhelmed. Would you like some water? I mean, I'm not sure what your species drinks, but hydration is important during stressful situations." The war beast's response was a sound that the translation matrix rendered as, "What the hell is wrong with your planet?" though the actual meaning was probably far more existentially complex. "Oh, Earth?" The human shrugged. "Yeah, it's got some quirks, but you adapt, you know? Life finds a way and all that. Speaking of which, are we almost done here? I've got a xenobiology study group in 20 minutes, and we're covering symbiotic relationships in hostile environments." The creature's bioluminescence had settled into what the Academy's instruments identified as deep contemplation mixed with species-wide re-evaluation of life choices. For the first time in recorded history, a war beast from the void reaches was experiencing something that might charitably be called humility. And the human, blissfully unaware that they had just caused an existential crisis in one of the galaxy's most feared predators, checked their chronometer, and began gathering up their sandwich wrapper with the casual efficiency of someone who had more important places to be. The war beast's contemplative silence stretched for exactly 47 seconds, long enough for Vexhai to wonder if the creature had suffered some form of psychological breakdown, but not long enough for him to decide whether that would be covered under the warranty. Then the bioluminescence shifted to patterns that Academy instruments had never recorded before. Deep purples flowed into amber streaks, punctuated by flashes of silver that seemed to exist in dimensions the observation equipment couldn't quite process. The psychic emanations changed, too, from confused evaluation to something that felt distinctly like preparation. "Uh-oh," said Dr. Kethavar, the Academy's xenopsychology specialist, her 4 eyes widening in what her species considered the appropriate response to impending doom. "It's initiating the deep protocol." "The what now?" Vexhai demanded, though part of him suspected he didn't want to know. "Final evaluation phase. The creature attempts full psychic integration with the candidate's species consciousness, their collective warfare memory, cultural understanding of violence, species-wide approach to conflict resolution. It's only been documented 3 times in the past century, and 2 of those candidates never recovered their sanity." The human, meanwhile, had noticed the light show and was studying it with the sort of professional interest typically reserved for mildly engaging lectures. "That's much better," they said approvingly. "More dynamic, better color coordination, very atmospheric. Are you feeling more confident now? Because honestly, the whole intimidation thing works better when you commit to the aesthetic." The beast's response was to extend its consciousness directly into what the psychologists called the species warfare matrix, essentially attempting to download humanity's entire approach to organized violence. This was the ultimate test. "Show me how your kind wages war, and I will determine whether you deserve recognition as a true predator." What it found there apparently violated several laws of physics, and at least one treaty regarding psychological warfare. The creature's bioluminescence began strobing in patterns that hurt to observe. Its psychic emanations shifted from confident evaluation to something approaching horror, then circled back through fascination and settled somewhere in the neighborhood of profound respect mixed with genuine terror. "Oh, you're accessing our military history," the human realized. "That's ambitious. You might want to start with something smaller. Maybe work your way up to the really creative stuff. The Punic Wars are pretty straightforward if you want to begin there." The Warbeast was apparently already past the Punic Wars and, well, into more contemporary material. The readings from the psychic monitors suggested it had discovered nuclear weapons and was trying to process the concept of mutually assured destruction, a philosophical framework that seemed to be causing it significant cognitive dissonance. "Yeah, that one takes some getting used to," the human agreed sympathetically. "The whole idea of building weapons specifically to never use them, very counterintuitive from a traditional predator perspective. But it worked out pretty well for us, all things considered." The creature's next psychic probe apparently found biological warfare, because its bioluminescence shifted to colors that didn't exist in standard visual spectrums, and its emanations took on overtones that made every sentient being in the observation deck suddenly remember their own mortality. "Ah, you found the interesting stuff," the human nodded. "Chemical weapons, engineered pathogens, targeted genetic modification. We got really creative once we figured out how molecules worked. Though, to be fair, most of that violates our current ethical frameworks. We try not to use the really nasty techniques unless absolutely necessary." Dr. Kethvar was making notes with the frantic energy of someone documenting either a breakthrough in interspecies psychology or the complete collapse of established xenobiological theory. "It's accessing deeper layers," she reported. "Industrial warfare, resource-based conflict, something the computers are translating as strategic bombing doctrine." The Warbeast's physical form had begun to tremble. Not with aggression or predatory excitement, but with what looked suspiciously like awe mixed with existential dread. The psychic emanations were cycling through emotions that most species didn't have names for. The feeling of recognizing a superior predator, combined with the dawning realization that you had been viewing yourself as the apex of evolution when you were actually somewhere in the middle of a much larger food chain. "Are you getting to the space-based stuff yet?" the human asked conversationally. "Because that's where things get really interesting. Orbital bombardment, stellar engineering, weaponized black holes, though that last one is still theoretical. Mostly." The creature's bioluminescence flickered and went dark for several seconds. When the patterns resumed, they were different, more subdued, less aggressive, with undertones that the translation matrix was rendering as respectful acknowledgement and "please don't hurt me." "Oh, come on," the human said, sounding genuinely concerned. "Don't let it overwhelm you. Every species has their specializations. You're clearly very good at the whole psychic intimidation thing. And that muscle coordination is impressive. Very efficient movement patterns. We humans just happen to be really, really good at applied creative violence. It's not personal." The psychic probe was apparently now accessing humanity's theoretical warfare research, concepts like gray goo scenarios, vacuum decay weapons, and the casual way human physicists discussed turning the fundamental forces of reality into tactical assets. The Warbeast's emanations had shifted to something that could only be described as reverent terror. "Vacuum decay is probably overkill for most situations," the human continued helpfully. "Very effective, but it has some significant drawbacks in terms of collateral damage. Specifically, it would destroy everything in the observable universe, so we keep that one in the emergency use only category." The creature's trembling had intensified, and its 6 eyes were now focused on the human with the sort of attention typically reserved for natural disasters or religious experiences. The bioluminescent patterns had settled into steady, respectful pulses, what the Academy's databases identified as a formal acknowledgement of superior predatory status. For the first time in documented history, a war beast from the void reaches was experiencing something its species had no evolutionary framework for: the recognition that it was not, in fact, at the top of the galactic food chain. What happened next would require the Academy to completely rewrite their xenobiological textbooks, assuming anyone believed the incident reports. The war beast lowered itself to the floor of its containment field in a posture that every species in the galaxy recognized instinctively: the universal submission display of a predator acknowledging a superior alpha. Its bioluminescence shifted to soft, steady patterns that the translation matrix identified as formal deference and please accept my allegiance. The silence in the observation deck was so complete that Vexhai could hear his own circulatory systems struggling to process what they were witnessing. "Well, that's new," the human said, apparently unimpressed by this historic reversal of galactic predatory hierarchy. "Are you asking if you can join my pack?" Because I should probably mention that I don't actually have a pack. Humans mostly gave up the whole pack hunting thing once we invented agriculture. The creature's response was a complex series of psychic emanations that roughly translated to, "I formally request acceptance as your beta predator," mixed with, "Please teach me your advanced killing techniques." "Okay, but I'm not really qualified to train apex predators," the human continued pragmatically. "I'm studying xenopsychology, not military tactics. Though I suppose if you're interested in learning about human hunting methods, I could explain some basic principles." Dr. Kethvar was frantically taking notes, while simultaneously having what appeared to be a minor nervous breakdown. "This is unprecedented," she muttered. "Completely unprecedented. The creature is attempting to initiate pack bonding protocols with a species it has never encountered before." The war beast's next emanation was more specific, a request for instruction in what the translation computers were struggling to render as efficient prey processing techniques and optimal resource extraction methodologies. "Well," the human mused, "if you really want to know about human hunting strategies, I guess we could start with persistence hunting. That's probably our most distinctive technique. See, most predators rely on burst speed or overwhelming force, but humans developed a different approach entirely." The creature's attention focused with the intensity of a graduate student taking notes on advanced theoretical physics. "We just keep going. We're not particularly fast or strong, but we have excellent endurance and temperature regulation. So we would literally just follow prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Could take days, but we'd always outlast them eventually. Very energy efficient once you account for the caloric investment." The war beast's bioluminescence shifted to patterns indicating profound appreciation for elegant tactical solutions. "Then there's tool usage," the human continued, warming to the topic. "Most species develop tools for construction or manipulation, but humans weaponized everything: rocks, sticks, fire, agriculture, metallurgy, chemistry, nuclear physics. Basically, any new discovery immediately gets evaluated for its potential military applications." The psychic emanations from the creature now carried undertones of what could only be described as professional admiration. "Cooperative hunting was crucial too," the human added. "Pack coordination, but with language, planning, and abstract reasoning. We could coordinate complex multi-phase operations across vast distances and time frames. Very scalable approach." By this point, every Academy official in the observation deck was coming to the same uncomfortable realization. They had not acquired a prestigious training aid. They had accidentally imported a cosmic apex predator demonstrated that humans were an even more dangerous species, and were now witnessing the formation of an interspecies alliance between two varieties of evolved killing machine. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the human asked the war beast with genuine concern. "Because humans aren't really pack animals anymore. We form complex social structures based on resource sharing, mutual benefit, and abstract concepts like justice and reciprocity. It's much more complicated than traditional predator hierarchies." The creature's response was immediate and emphatic. A psychic emanation that translated roughly to, "I acknowledge your superior predatory status and request inclusion in your social structure, regardless of complexity." "All right then," the human shrugged, "but we'll need to establish some ground rules. No hunting sentient beings without explicit authorization, no psychic intimidation of Academy personnel, and you'll need to attend orientation sessions about human social customs and ethical frameworks." The warbeast's agreement was so enthusiastic that several monitoring devices overloaded trying to process the psychic intensity. "Great. I'm thinking we should probably start with basic pack hunting techniques: coordination, communication, target selection. Though honestly, most of our effective strategies involve tools and technology rather than natural abilities. Hope you're good at learning new skill sets." Vexhai watched through the observation deck as the human and the galaxy's most feared predator began what appeared to be an informal planning session about hunting methodology. The creature was hanging on every word with the sort of attention typically reserved for religious revelation, while the human discussed tactical principles with the casual expertise of someone explaining a hobby to a friend. "Sir," his aide whispered urgently, "what are we going to tell the Board of Trustees?" Vexhai considered this question while watching the human demonstrate proper pack coordination signals to a creature that could theoretically devastate entire star systems. The Academy had wanted a prestigious training aid to improve their reputation. Instead, they had apparently confirmed that Earth's exchange student belonged to a species that made the galaxy's apex predators want to take notes and ask for tactical advice. The human and warbeast were now walking toward the exit together, apparently having concluded their impromptu orientation session. As they passed the observation deck, the human waved casually at the assembled Academy officials. "Thanks for setting this up," they called out cheerfully. "This should be interesting. We're going to start with some basic cooperative hunting exercises. Nothing too complicated. Maybe some pack coordination drills, strategic planning scenarios, that sort of thing." The warbeast's bioluminescence pulsed in patterns that roughly translated to, "I am honored to serve under superior predator command," mixed with, "Please teach me more about vacuum decay weapons." As they disappeared around the corner, Vexhai realized that his academy had just become the first educational institution in galactic history to accidentally facilitate an alliance between humanity and the Void Reach's finest killing machine. The marketing implications alone were staggering, though perhaps, he reflected, they should consider revising their insurance policies first.